Patra to have the opening remarks, and then Professor Keshab will introduce the speakers in details, and then moderate the entire session. So over to Professor Rabi Patra. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Amarendra. Esteemed speakers, Professor Andrew Roberts and Lakhwinder Singh, moderator of this session, Professor Keshab, and fellow participants. It is a very good occasion for us that we are discussing a very important topic that is specifically relevant to India and to the state of Odisha in particular. As we know, in the present day world, innovation is the key to most of the development issues um, everywhere. Therefore, whenever there are challenges to innovation, there will be challenges for development also. So it is therefore necessary that we should discuss these challenges and suggest measures to how to overcome them. That what is important, and I think this will be the subject matter of the discussion today, on which Professor Andrew and Professor Lakhwinder Singh will focus. So thank you. I need not take much time. I would now request Professor Keshab to introduce our eminent speakers and start the discussion. Thank you.
Sir, you need to unmute. Okay, for the audience, I think we know the moderator, Professor Keshab is the editor-in-chief of our journal, Odisha Economic Journal, and he was also the president of Odisha Economic Association. And he doesn't, of course, need much introduction because he's our member of OEA very much. So yeah, over to you, sir. Now you can start this.
So let me welcome two of the very distinguished scholars in innovation studies, if I may very broadly put. But then let me first introduce Professor Andrew Roberts Cummings. Maybe I'll sort of go in for very, very brief introduction of him, as I sort of suppose that during his presentation, we would probably know him better through his own exposition. He is a development anthropologist with 30 years of experience. His sort of focus has been on planning and development in regions which may be described as peripheral, or sort of like smaller economies, or sort of like economies and societies which have not really been mainstreamed, or which have not been benefited from the progress that science, technology, and innovation may have made elsewhere. And he has been he's a very grounded scholar. I mean, if I may say so, grounded in a very literal sense of the term, because I think most of his experience also comes from his sort of like very intense sort of field visits, field trips, of staying in rural areas. And so in that, we are very lucky at the Odisha Economic Association to listen to him, someone who would not just be talking only about sort of, let's say, lofty theories, but actually will be talking about challenges facing people and regions which have been usually marginalized. He has been very closely associated with sort of several international bodies dealing with innovation, capacity building, and sort of knowledge creation. He's currently affiliated with Nitlapan, that's a Central American University in Nicaragua. He's also sort of based in El Salvador. So he is with an organization known as FLACSO. And he has been guiding students. With his very interesting background of sociology and anthropology, and great work and interest in technology. His PhD is from Aalborg University in Denmark. So that makes him a very, very special scholar, I must say, to whom we listen to. So with that, I'll sort of move on to our next speaker, Professor Lakhwinder Singh, not very unknown to many of us. He is currently a professor of economics at the Thapar School of Liberal Arts and Sciences in Patiala, and he also holds a visiting professorship with the Institute for Human Development. He had been the president of the Indian Society of Labor Economics in the last session. He was for a long time, he headed the Department of Economics in the Punjabi University in Patiala. He also was a faculty at the NIPF, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and he held distinguished sort of positions as Ford Foundation postdoctoral fellowship and Asia Fellow of International Institute of Education in New York. He has been a visiting professor with Yale University, Seoul National University, and he has been very, very active, and he's kind of the lead of what is described as the India Leaks, which is a chapter of Global Leaks in India. He has been editing a very, very interesting and very popular and very significant journal called Millennial Asia, which is sort of indexed in Scopus and Clarivate Analytics. He has edited and written several books in the recent years, and some of the very recent two books, if I may refer to, that is Agrarian Distress and Farmer Suicides in North India. And the other book he has edited very recently is Reimagining Innovation Systems in the COVID and Post-COVID World. So with that, we welcome both Professor Andrew and Professor Lakhwinder Singh. They will sort of decide how the sessions would flow. But then we are also looking forward to more questions, answers towards the end. So with that, may I request Andrew to please carry on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keshab, and it's very privileged to be here with Lakhwinder, distinguished scholar from your region, and hopefully someday I'll be able to get to know the country on the ground. Very early on, my father introduced me to the Kerala experience, and actually that was sort of an inspiration of seeing that something different could happen from a context of working to include the people and what we call the development process. And it's interesting now to have some connection to another region where this process is happening, and maybe or maybe not happening in terms of inclusion. So that's a problematic we should talk about. I'll share my screen now and then go forward with the presentation. Frequently try to be short, and not always short, but I'll try to do the best I can to be short, to enable some space for discussion. Please let me know you see the full screen.
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah.
Good. Let me get this away. Okay, so I want to talk from my experience. I came here at 23 years old and started working as a development practitioner. I spent 18 years in doing that, and I'm a sociocultural anthropologist as my background. I'm from the United States, so I can't speak of being from the global South. I can speak of working in the global South for 30 years, and from here having the possibility of doing a master's and PhD in a very interesting context in Aalborg University, in a program, in a department focused on technology and society, and with 15 years of working on a project here in Central America, sustainable development strategies for Central America with researchers from Aalborg University, introducing the systems of innovation approach. So that's how I came to this field, from a very different place where I was working on local development, participatory processes, and so forth. And I've come to focus on working on understanding the emergence and evolution of innovation capabilities and systems of innovation in Central America and certainly Latin American context. I'm currently speaking from Ecuador for my first visit here. I've been a long-term member of GlobalX and was part of participating in Druid when the Global South researchers started to come into the Global North network that was working with this evolutionary approach to systems of innovation. So I'll go just through this very quickly again. Where am I speaking from? I'm speaking from researching the emergence and evolution of these innovation capabilities, specifically in small-scale rural agro-industries, examples of social and solidarity economy, territorial systems of innovation in non-peripheral, non-metropolitan, more rural peripheral regions like the one you're seeing here. The green you see is sugarcane mostly, and this is one of the examples that I look at of the cooperative that's doing non-industrialized sugarcane production, which I'm sure exists in India in different forms, and has been becoming more sophisticated, and actually now is becoming more important and a lot of demand on the global market. You can see here some images that give you a sense of the more traditional approach and the more industrialized small scale industry approach to producing this kind of product. The kinds of things that are happening on a family basis and more or less on a cooperative basis. And the kind of products you can see, the vegan, you can see tourism, you can see some interesting things that they're trying to do coming off of this experience. There's also a longer term research in one area where I started working, from the very beginning, which was Tecoluca and the Nonualcos region, the other side of that volcano you were looking at in the beginning, where they've tried, about cashews. Kerala, actually, they sent cashews early, the seeds to Kerala to be processed, and then they began processing them themselves. And innovations is going along that process. The people that are involved talking a lot about the significance of these kind of efforts for quality of work, thinking about this from a social and solidarity economy perspective, and thinking about what is the meaning of selling on global value chains, but that are alternative, that have considerations around fairer trade, still capitalist fairer trade, still where does the bulk of the resources end up? We can't take for granted fairer trade in terms of power relations and so forth, fairer finance, which has been fundamental for keeping this initiative going, young women and youth doing their efforts, a local grounding of this kind of effort. And it was the emblematic festival and Marañón, which is cashews, in Tecoluca area. So that's one place that I'm talking from. I'm not going to talk about those cases as such or really in any depth, but I did that in India Lakes a couple years ago. Also, just working as a development practitioner, committing a lot of errors and learning about those over the years on how we can promote, how we can be part of, be part of local development processes, and what our role should be, especially if you're like me, coming from outside of the country, but from yourselves coming from the university. When you get into these situations, how to really understand what our role is in those places, which is, I think, to, in essence, try to build capabilities and support what the local actors are doing. Listen before we talk in dialogues that could around different knowledges. I was a master's director for 8 years, which really was just key in the sense that from a university perspective, which we know is a key actor in a science and technology innovation system, how we can come from a university and try to work with territorial actors. And then, well, I got fired from the university, been 5 years as an independent international consultant, looking at these processes from a research, but applied research in evaluation, doing feasibility studies, doing critical systematization of development projects. You can see that in quotes, because I actually think we could probably do well if we could get rid of the idea of development and think about the actual process we want to talk about, because the idea of development is just so problematic, so much connected to the Eurocentric idea of progress, which both capitalists and socialists major thinkers have bought into in an uncritical way. And now we need to think about decolonizing, if we want to say that, development thinking, and going to post-development thinking, as some Southern researchers have thought about, or alternatives to development. So that's where I'm coming from. So what are the priority innovation challenges to strengthen innovation capabilities and public policies from the global South? And we could think about transformative innovation capabilities and transformative innovation public policies, which is something that's coming up in the discussions. We all have really problematic histories, and so we can never forget our problematic history. El Salvador has a very problematic history, 200 years of post-colonial, very problematic development, what we call development around agro-industrial processes, financialization. We won't get into that, neoliberal structural adjustment, but the emergence of innovative territorial development alternatives after the peace accords, which is the time that I've been here. And we did to really focus on local or endogenous generation of technological innovations, which are often ignored, often invisibilized, often intentionally invisibilized. I mean, and then you have, like, India has this amazing grassroots innovation experience, which is trying to bring that to the global, to the national and global scene. So you have micro-innovative strengths that exist, but are often isolated or encapsulated. So we also can't just think about one place and one local experience. We need to think about connecting those. How do we connect those? And come up from the bottom up with some kind of transformative capabilities, because we're in a real problematic situation where if we don't do something radical to change what we're doing, we're all going to not exist in the future. The young people that are here are going to have a really problematic future. And we also now have this problematic situation of governance on a national, international scale that's making everything worse. So how do we take that on from an innovation perspective? Because we can't ignore that. We can't ignore the needs for transformation. We can't do innovation for development the same way we've been doing it before, because it's not working. We need to think about it another way totally. So we need to reveal the most important constituents of these dynamics and bring them together in some kind of bottom-up transformative innovation movement. So we've got this question, we're talking about development. Innovation for what development? Obviously, we can't think about the development that's got us into this situation. We need to think about alternatives to that development, however those be defined. And who defines those? Obviously, in this case, I would be saying the local actors, but we can't encapsulate the local actors, and they have bounded knowledge? How do we have knowledge dialogues that open this up and have co-creation, especially on a national scale or regional scale, state scale in India, of what kind of development does our region want? And then how should we co-create innovation policies and practices to promote, to move this development forward? Who should be doing that and for whom? And that's a problem. We should do this together. That's the major message, because otherwise it don't work. So there's three things I wanted to say in the 7 or 8 minutes that I have left. One is to really focus on enabling emergence and strengthening of innovation capabilities from the peripheral of the Global South. We can think about the Global South being India, but Global South in El Salvador is very much different. I mean, El Salvador is a small country. It doesn't even, it's smaller than any of your states. So that's perspective I'm talking about. How do we create networking capabilities to mobilize the resources for transformative innovation, experimental initiatives? How do we strengthen learning capabilities, learning by doing, but reflecting on experience, which we know requires frequently facilitation? Maybe that's a role for the universities, facilitate. That's learning by doing, but thinking about praxis that goes into that brings us to another higher level, second order learning, which is useful for innovation. How do we learn from searching and exploring alternative practices to incorporate transformative innovation ideas into our local practices? And how do we do this from an organizational basis that in reality we need to come together? And so how's this collective effort, based on families, based on people, but some kind of collective effort that moves us forward to being able to create collective transformative innovation capabilities? How do we create the coalitions that enable that? How do we build in the resources? Those are questions. So how can I say what I've learned to do that? I think it's very much about really enabling, focusing. What we want to do is not a development project that has a process and results, because finishing the project, the process is ending, and basically if it doesn't work, we've evaluated, everything looks good on the evaluation scale, the donor's all happy, but actually what happened on the ground didn't really transform anything. So we need to think about going beyond projects to doing something different and to enabling processes, which means if we're coming from the university, the first thing we need to do is to listen, to figure out where the local actors are talking about problems that require innovation, and that they don't have the knowledge or the resources to innovate, but they have the understanding of what's going on, and they certainly are the ones that will be doing it. So we need to listen. And then based on listening, attentive listening, create dialogues, what we could call knowledge, or even there's a word in sabiduría, wisdom dialogues, where we think about combining knowledges is very difficult. We need to have the time to do that. How do we have universities that will actually pay attention to this and will give us academic credit for doing this? That's a problem, right? We only get evaluated on our papers and our teaching. And so if we don't change the university, if we want to do this, be facilitators and the local process, universities are really important because they don't really they don't depend on development projects. NGOs depend on development projects. They're really key actors. They have much more local connections in many cases. The state, those NGOs that are working on a local level, that are national, that are regional, those are important coalition actors because they can mobilize resources and are much more agile than we are as university professors. That's one thing. The second thing is We know that innovation is systemic. And so we need to think about enabling the emergence of territorial systems of innovation, regional systems, local systems. When I say territorial, it doesn't really work in English, but it's talking about local and regional systems of innovation. So you think about local and communities, and I think you have municipalities, but then you have a state, and the state in India is really important. The country in El Salvador would be the level of the state. So we think about local municipal processes, regional processes on a subnational level, and then national processes. How do we create these territorial systems of innovation? How do you enable them to emerge in relation to national and sectoral systems of innovation? The first thing is they can't be engineered. That's a idea that, you know, these projects come from the north and they have this idea of smart specialization. We have these waves of ideas that come from the north, right? The smart specialization, the transformative innovation policy wave is coming in. The what's it called? Masukata, you know, her ideas on the national the national level. Okay, that's all good. But we need to be able to capture that and to transform that into what's happening on, you know, what's really relevant on the ground. So we can't just copy these. These systems of innovation can't be copied, especially on a local level. Think of building out from the innovation networks that exist. Many of the innovation networks actually are connections to the outside. So territorial innovation systems could actually be focused on creating networking capabilities, and in networking context, how to learn from international actors, how to learn from national actors, how to influence their decision making so that actually what they do can be relevant on the local basis. How can this process be facilitated, enabled with territorial actors? They need us, in the sense that us as university actors, because we could accompany them on the long basis if our universities are willing to do that. But the university is not going anyplace. It's not dependent on projects. It can be there. It's from the territory, but it doesn't have a good connection to these processes. So you think about how we can come in a different way into these processes and being facilitators. We're not directors. We're not promoters of anything. We're facilitating a process of dialogue between the territory and the external actors. And then nothing's neutral. It's a very political, frequently political. There's my 20 minutes last message. We need science and technology and innovation policies that are designed and implemented and evaluated in a way that addresses the publicly, to be locally defined, publicly defined national problems, but those having a local connotation in a transformative way to these transformative development challenges, the real transformation of our socio-technological systems, which are not sustainable. They're not socially sustainable. They're not socially inclusive. They're not about inclusive development. They're not ecologically sustainable. And they're not about regenerative ecological development. No, we can't just conserve. We need to regenerate. And they're not going to be economically sustainable over the long term, because we know we have to have those three things together. That's a lesson learned from the past. If we're just talking about economic modernization, where are we? Exactly where we are, on the brink of extinction. So we can't think about sustainability in without bringing in a socially cultural sustainability. I'll end here. How can coalitions of territorial actors promoting innovative, transformative innovation activities, really co-design? How can coalitions of territorial actors influence policy? The only way to do that is in connection between them. Individual coalitions can't do that. They need to come together on a regional or a national basis. So how does that happen? Again, I think university actors are really important to bring those different experiences together and work like in India Licks over a national scale. So I'd like to finish there. I hope that's been good. I hope that we're the person does. I'll leave it there. Thank you very
Thank,
much.
thank you, Andrew, so very much, because I think you, to me, as an individual listener, sort of impressed me the most, that you're also sort of not just talking about innovation systems which are sort of to be informed by, to be governed by, to be sort of decided by the local people, but also you are probably very mildly maybe, but you sort of did question the so-called development paradigm, which has come from the north maybe, and it's only talking about progress. And with that little sort of focus on progress, I think it also meant it definitely meant that that progress in that development paradigm essentially also entails a lot of resource exploitation, extraction, sort of movement of people, varieties of sort of events, if I may say so. In the global south, we are probably sort of subdued in the great talk about progress of nations. And in the long run, maybe we are sort of seeing that in very clear forms in different regions. And even within the so-called progressed or so-called developed regions, we also see patches of underdevelopment or peripheries, or colonies, or internal colonies, as it used to be discussed earlier. So I think in that, your articulation about bringing in innovation with the participation of local people with local knowledge who decide what they want, they don't want. And also, I think your last point about sort of involving, quote unquote, the academia, or sort of people who may have a much broader sort of worldview, joining them in that process is, I think, is a kind of a transformative approach to innovation, which is very different from the science and technology driven innovation that we have been knowing so far. So I'm sure there'll be more questions. So many thanks, Andrew, for that very, very nicely presented talk. And so let's listen to Professor Lakhwinder Singh. And I'm sure he'll have a lot of ideas on the Indian instance. But then with that, maybe we'll have a much better discussion. So, Lakhwinder, please.
Let me share my screen. Is it visible or not?
Not so far, but
Share screen. Okay, let me entire screen. Now visible?
yes, maybe you could please make it full screen.
Yes.
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Keshab Das, for giving me an opportunity. Professor Rabi Patra, President of the Odisha Economic Association. Professor Keshab Das, editor of the Journal of the Odisha Economic Association, and a great friend of mine. Dr. Amarinder Das, who is mainly the responsible for the this kind of program to organize. More importantly, Professor Andrew Cummings, a great friend of mine who has agreed to give this initial talk, uh, friends of the Odisha Economic Association, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed grateful that I have been invited to make intervention in this particular kind of juncture. And I have, after the talk of Professor Andrews, who has been talking about the peripheral regions which are dealing with agriculture and agro processing, I thought India has also a substantial amount of problems which are multidimensional in nature. So I would like to talk on these kind of issues. Let me begin with saying that India and China both are emerging economies in the world. China is almost reaching towards the path of a developed economy, but not reaching exactly there. It is about to reach. And another is India, where you'll find that that is going to be there in terms of reaching or trying to reach to a developed kind of economy. So if we look at these two diagrams, you will be able to find one is sharing the GDP shares of China, the another is workforce, and you'll find that the agriculture sector is turning out to be in terms of declining in GDP as well as uh, involving in the workforce. So that is, but still, compared to the developed countries of the world, the workforce involved in agriculture is still much higher, nearly 22.57% in China. So that is very, very important to understand that agriculture is expected to be a very important in terms of employing the workforce. This is India, which is contrasting in the case where you'll find that the agriculture in terms of GDP share has gone down substantially. But when we look in terms of the workforce involved, it is very, very high. 46.1% of the workforce is still engaged in the agriculture sector of the economy, but the GDP share is very low. And when we look at the manufacturing and the services sector, their income levels are relatively very high, especially the services sector, but their engagement of employing the workers is very, very low. This is contrast with China as well, because the workforce engaged in the services sector is very high compared to India. So this is a contrasting cases, but challenge is how to employ the people. That is very important, which are engaging in the agriculture sector of the economy. Now, to inform Andrews that the agriculture, as per our Constitution of India, is the subject matter of subnational governments. So that does mean the agriculture is not in the priority list of the national government of the country. So therefore, the subnational regions are the foundational region who can take the decisions regarding the public policy innovation system, what kind of innovation system they are expected to put in form. So we have also the regional, each state level or sub-regional level, we have agriculture universities, which you have talked about. There are agriculture university, and what they're doing, are they really creating the value in terms of generating capabilities of the people, or they are doing something else? Here is also some kind of problem, which I will take up with later. The another very important issue is that agriculture is almost smallholder agriculture, and the average land size has gone down substantially from 2.28 hectare in the year 1970-71 to 0.83, although there are variations across sub-national regions of India, but largely this is the average picture of the Indian economy. So marginal small holding own 59% of the owned area, but operated area is 46.9%. The proportion of households of marginal small ones was 85%. So it is largely male dominated agriculture. The females are working, but not, in terms of land ownership and all that, they do not have the kind of say. So agriculture is largely distressed agriculture. Across the regions, we have witnessed over the last 20-25 years period of time, farmers having committed suicides, even agricultural laborers have committed suicides. That has been noted in the largest statistics debated even in the parliament, and the quality of statistics are also questioned over a period of time. But the NGOs and other farmers organization have collected their own statistics, which are much higher compared to the government statistics, and government has almost stopped, collecting these kind of statistics because they consider that farmer suicide is no more a problem in India. But the farmer unions are agitating in northern part of India, especially. They are keep on raising the crisis as well as the farmer suicide kind of issue, which has happened over a period of time. The fundamental problem of the agriculture is, as you have talked about, is low productivity, low wage, but relatively high cost agriculture, especially after the liberalization period. The input cost, which has been, released from the kind of government controls, that has multiple times gone up. But you'll find that the farm produced prices have not matched to the kind of input prices which have gone. So terms of trade has been continuously transferring income from agriculture to the industrial sector or the other sectors of the economy. So north to south, almost in India, almost all states of India recorded suicide, which are continued unabated. Post-liberalization period in Indian economy, in terms of trade, has been against agriculture. It is a deliberate policy in the transformation processes. So it is fundamentally talked about that in India, the agriculture crisis is basically policy-driven crisis, because if your transformation process is slow or is not happening the way it was expected to happen, then you will find that the way agriculture has been used in the process of transformation traditionally in the Western developed countries of the world, and nowadays in the countries like India, China, where you'll find that India is caught in the process because the transformation process in East Asia, Asian countries are relatively faster. But here we can call that slow process and policy driven crisis occurring in the agriculture sector of the economy. So even you will find that most importantly, when it is being argued that agriculture turned out to be a commercial activity, but as bumper crop happens, market crashes, then you'll find that minimum support prices are very limited to various crops, and then you'll find that the crisis is the burden of the failure or the or price crash is on the farmers, rather than you'll find a bearing some other party of the country. So, what is important is agriculture is mostly neglected in terms of investment, public investments. Soft and hard infrastructure is very weak. It is also noted in the various budgets over a period of time. But you'll find that private sector is expected to be, involved to, remove these kind of impediments, but never, this is not happening. So, mostly the agriculture is private trade driven, except the food security items. Other items are largely private trade driven. The gross fixed capital formation in agriculture happen to be declining and is very low, but that too is financed by the private sector. That is, whatever is the gross fixed capital is the farm household which are doing some kind of investment, even though they are small in size, but they have been continuing doing a lot of investment for, you know, trying to do some kind of operations. So share of private finance farm household capital is 70%. Borrowing and savings are there, but indebtedness is very high. Then seed technologies, as you have been talking about the role of the agriculture sector of the economy, they are provided by the state level agriculture universities and agriculture departments, but highly dependent on union government led goals and finances. So our university system is fundamentally dependent upon the union government's finances and also the goals set by those as well, projects driven kind of thing. So therefore you'll find that the universities, state government's finances are relatively very low. Therefore you'll find that they are not adhering to the priorities, although the constitution says that the state innovation system, the regional innovation system should be stronger, but they have lacking resources and they are not able to do that. So there is another important reason is that over a period of time, private monopolies are emerging as a stronger power in terms of providing the knowledge, seed technologies, as well as involving the farmers in terms of contract farming and all that. So and this kind of processes are not environmental friendly, and therefore they are importing the agriculture seed technology and all that, which is not uh, matching with the local cultural kind of things. So therefore there is a higher level of challenge without much attention, and capital investment by government is relatively very low. So, most important aspect, which in terms of policy challenges which are happening, is the intersectoral linkages are relatively very weak. The UNIDO DST Government of India Innovation Survey 2023 clearly brought out that there is a need to build Indian food innovation system. So that means you have to link the raw food produced by the farmers with the processing kind of activities, which you have shown with the first picture clearly that high degree of sophistication is happening even in jaggery production, which we are having almost in every state of India. And then you'll find that packaging kind of thing, which you have been talking, is very, very sophisticated one. Although India has been beginning towards that, but this is very stray and not very common kind of things. But few are very successful, but others are not. So what is important here is that the innovation survey, India's innovation survey says capability building is the most important, which I think, Andrew, you have argued very strongly that capability building is fundamental. How to do it is very difficult, because from the last 70 years of independent India, we have been trying to build the capabilities, but that has not happened. Even this, every state have at least one agriculture university, and sometime you have the another supplementary animal related universities kind of thing. But the processing kind of, they are more enabling, they have enabled the environment, and capabilities are there to produce more, but to process and add value is not there. So link the capability and linkages with the innovation system are very, very difficult and low level. Largely it is on the way the system has been turned into crisis, because monopoly capital is pressurizing the state and the central government of India that this is the space which they want, and they have substantially made inroads into the system, even though a lot of approvals are required in the case of biotechnology, but those has been not done, and large number of crops which are not human friendly are being grown, processed and distributed, as monopoly capital is very nickel, as well as difficult to deal with, and the national and state governments are polite to their kind of needs, demands, and then allowing them to intervene. So the fundamental issue which is being raised in India is that, is it the corporate is the only solution to the capability building and generating a system which is highly linked, interlinked, or you can do through cooperative interventions. So cooperative institutions are relatively very weak, and people are arguing that cooperatives are not working. Therefore, you'll find that we have go to the corporate kind of sector. But however, you'll find that the kind of cooperatives which usually being failed, that is operated by the bureaucratic system and public system and not through vote system. But we have some very successful example. For example, Amul has been very successful, turned out to be not only in India, but it's turning out to be a multinational kind of company. So therefore, you'll find that such kind of cooperative can do wonders. So cooperative has a choice, but it is not the choice of the policymakers and the government. So if government adopts cooperative as a policy alternative to corporates, that is one possibility where capabilities can be built, and then you'll find that interlinkages in the system of innovation can be built, and that will transform the economy, society, and polity. So here you'll find that education, extension, and capability building is very important. And here market and state is complementary with each other, but you'll find that state is paying the way more towards market, and that is market is being not run by the competitive kind of things, being monopolized. We all know that the risky activities R&D, research and development system, and that is being done because larger amount of expenditure is incurred by the monopolies, and therefore market is dominated by the monopoly. So therefore low kind of advantages to the scattered kind of small scale producers. So therefore state is expected to play a role, but state is moving a direction where you'll find that they submit to the monopoly capital rather than going to regulate them. So what is required is linking production to processing, and redeployment of surpluses is very important. This is being done by the larger number of Scandinavian countries through cooperatives. This was also done largely in the early stages of economic development in the East Asian countries. Even I have been first-hand experience of the South Korean country as well as Taiwan, where you'll find that larger amount of these linkages has been, working, and surpluses generated was redeployed, and then you'll find that the development process has been faster, and transformation has been much faster with relatively lesser burden on the local people of the transformation which is going on in the Indian economy and larger number of global South. So it is reducing the role of the intermediary agency is very important, and cooperative has been playing and can play a very important role. Now, fundamental issue is, as Andrew has emphasized, capturing value chains. This is not a simple process because simple connection in value chains is very difficult. So capturing value chains is very important. It is not that you are participating in the value chains. So new value chain system required to be developed through the cooperative kind of system, and then surpluses can be retained and redeployed in terms of investment processes, capital formation deficiencies can be improved, and then you'll find that we have cooperative experience AML that can be very helpful to redesign the public policy toward that direction. So we have a window of opportunity given the regressive international economic order. Nowadays, you can understand that the only dominance which is happening is of the Trump, which is, uh, throwing stones day after day, and you'll find that water ripples are going everywhere. Most of the country governments are almost listening, looking into the situation, trying to ward off the adverse impacts which they are expected to happen. But I think that this is a destructive way to destroy the international global institutional architecture, which is not yet in favor of global South. But that was actually a window of opportunity, which is for the global South to, develop a new economic order. They have to be, joining together. They have to develop a collective kind of wisdom to change the kind of a regressive system which we have been operating in. And I think when you talk about, Andrew, the local kind of collectives, I think both local, regional, national global collectives are required to, confront with the kind of system in which we are going through. So what we require is people's movement. It is, difficult to understand today. Even you will find that whole of United States of America is in a great difficulty nowadays. In the last, 2 months period of time, but the people's movement is not happening. We have also witnesses a kind of situation when demonetization has happened. The people were in great trouble. They were in the banks on in lines. They're dying over there, and many deaths occurred, but people's movement has not occurred. So I think this is a peculiar kind of situation. The people have challenges, but people do not have a courage. Maybe because of the state machinery is turning to be very strong, and you'll find that they are generating a kind of fear, so that people are not able to get together to form collectives, and collective action is missing at that. So therefore, people's movement versus state promotion of monopoly capital is very, very important. Even Punjab farmers, especially the northern region, there is a lot of struggle of the farmers going on. They have registered the monopoly capital, and they have registered the state as well. And you'll find that still they are in trouble, because most of the things which we expect is that the right kind of policy and right kind of innovations should happen. So I think I should stop here, and we can have discussion now.
Thank you so very much, Professor Lakhwinder Singh. It's actually, in many ways, it's also sort of connected to what Andrew has been saying. I think there is a kind of a growing concern about certain sectors, like particularly whether it is, so you both focused on the farming sector, and then within that, Professor Lakhwinder also focused about chances of sort of connecting them to the value chains, and also sort of building certain kinds of local capabilities, so that the value addition happens through, let's say, agro processing. But the larger question, there are two sort of issues which sort of personally hit me. So one is the question of institutional issues. You see, like Professor Lakhwinder mentioning about maybe kind of a rethinking the significant role of the cooperatives as a force, and Professor Andrews mentioned about rethinking the whole sort of idea of development, local development. So these two sort of, so directly or indirectly sort of bring to the fore the role of people. So we are talking of joint action and sort of collective action, cooperatives, and people must come together. And so I think somewhere, maybe the last, I don't know, maybe last few decades or so, it is very difficult to identify who are the ones who would be the agencies of the people who should be sort of raising their voices. I think so. I think maybe that is what is completely dissipated by the kind of neoliberal sort of strategies which are dominated, and where we have been constantly told that the state is not the most efficient actor. So state has failed, and state might sort of play a very marginal role. So in that mess, I think even as we are discussing about the innovation challenges in the global south, I think it's also a question of the kind of institutional innovation in sort of creating a sort of powerful argumentative collectives of people. So whether cooperative is the only solution, or there is a need for other forms. But then with that, the issue still remains that because of the last, let's say, particularly since the 1990s, the dominance of the private capital, both national and international, that also has meant that the state has overtly or covertly sort of co-opted by the capital. And in that situation, what is that we are expecting, and as both the country experiences, the United States and India, We know that there have been sort of political issues. So I think maybe if the discussion is around those broad themes and sort of specifically to the rural economy or the farming sector, it may be helpful. So with that, let me open it for questions and comments from the audience. So anyone, please, you can just ask. Yeah, please. Yeah, Amarendra, why not? Yeah, please ask.
Yeah, no, thank you, Professor Andrew and Professor Lakhwinder Singh, for very beautiful presentation and providing the larger framework to understand actually the innovations actually that are happening in India, or say lack of innovations, actually, I would say. In fact, I was thinking particularly on agriculture sector, and since Professor Andrew was also talking about the public sector education and public universities and government education, and Professor Lakhwinder Singh was talking about agriculture universities and agriculture growth in India. See, in India now, we have moved from, say, public funding agriculture development to, say, what we call direct benefit transfer schemes. In the sense that actually we are transferring now cash, okay, to the people, to the farmers, and we are giving input subsidies. So when we give input subsidies and other direct cash transfers, now in the aggregate spending of government in agriculture sector, although may look like that it is remaining constant or it is growing at an incremental rate. But then, if you look at the composition, now this has gone like the expenditure for education, research and development, and infrastructure, particularly the capital formation, is declining. Okay? So how is this going to impact the innovation? Okay? Because yeah, funding basically for research is, I'm feeling that it is declining. So I hope I make some sense.
If I may request for any more questions so that we can take them together. I think the hand was raised by Professor Mitali Chinara. I don't know whether she is there or... yes, please.
Sir, I am here, but I don't have a specific question. I would like to listen to the response of Amarendra Das from the Rever professors. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we can just let this flow. Why don't we go from the first question on?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. It's something that's happening in a lot of places where we have these direct cash transfers to people, families, around certain concerns about their well-being. And in the agricultural sector, this isn't an area that I've looked at in detail, but it's my sense that it could be, if it was open, for example, to purchasing agroecological inputs for agriculture, or for investing in upgrading in family-based processing. Maybe there's some way that this could be positive in giving people their own agency to where they want to buy their inputs from, what kind of inputs they want to buy, etc. But it seems like in many cases it's actually the multinational agriculture input firms, which are very much related to green revolution agriculture, which we have a sense is not the way to go. And there's no real discussion of anything maybe on a higher level, right? You have a family transfer to families, and what happening on the collective basis, of the groups of families. So I think it's certainly problematic, and it's even more problematic if it's reducing the amount of public expenditure on science, technology, innovation. Especially, you can see it's not supporting capital formation, which we know is a key indicator if things are, if you're moving from one very basic local production of jaggery, or what I would call panela, to something that's more collective and has better manufacturing processes and requires some kind of capital investments, and maybe even creating some small processing units which really go beyond the individual family basis, to be to generate good quality work, and generate incomes for the people that are working and providing the input. So there's a problem in this model. Seems to be fragmented, and it seems to be directly promoting people to buy from the money's then transferred out again. It goes in, comes back out, and we don't see it really getting, supporting processes that are innovative or transformative in any way.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how it works in India. Lakhwinder can talk about that.
So let me talk to you, Professor Keshab Das and Amarinder. You have, thank you very much for raising very, very important and pertinent questions, which need to be talked, discussed, more threadbare. Maybe you have to organize another kind of talk on these two issues. But briefly, I would like to touch upon the concern first of Amarinder and then Professor Keshab Das. Uh, Amrinder, the idea of cash transfer is fundamentally against the idea of collective or cooperative action. I will tell you, if public goods are generated, which are common in nature, which have everybody using a similar kind of products. So if those kind of capital formation takes place and plays a role, the farmers are usually having, if they are facing any challenge, they get together and they can, ask or demand for improvement of those kind of things. Now, when you are giving them individually some amount of money, okay, and this is breaking from the others. So collective, you can break. This is individual values instead of cooperative value you are inculcating. So policy is that you are going to have a typical capitalist economic system where the value is individual, not collective. Okay, therefore the cash transfer, the one aim is that collective kind of efforts to be, reduced to the minimum level. The individual efforts, individualization should be more important, that how I am receiving, okay, not collectively, which is not visible, but everybody face a problem when there is a challenge, and they get together, and then they will similarly as digitization of technologies. While you are sitting at home doing work, you do not have a much connection with your co-workers, okay, and that generates a further kind of individualism and privacy, but collective actions are missing. So this is the capitalism which is intervening in that way to creating kind of individualism. That is a fundamental problem. So therefore, the aggregate expenditure which you are expected to do on capital formation, which is going to generate public goods and economies of scale in the agriculture sector of the economy and otherwise also, you are not going to do that, but you are going to give individual kind of transfer. Relative share of expenditure, what is required and what you actually do is very little. Okay, so this is, you can minimize on spending also. This is another target. So the wider issue which has been talked about by Professor Keshab Das is this: the institutions. you'll find that the fundamental aspect of the public intervention is that what kind of institutional framework you are building. Now, today, the basic institutional system which government builds is that is suitable to the corporate sector requirements. Therefore, earlier the grants given to the regional universities, both of the center and the state, has reduced to the minimum level. The researchers which were engaged when they are retiring, new people are not being appointed. So who will do research? Who will serve? They say the universities are not doing work. Therefore, you'll find that the private sector has to come in. But since you are not funding, you are not, allowing them to do the work which they have been doing, and then you will find that you are saying that they are not capable, they are inefficient, and therefore you have to do. The more important thing is that agency which has been talked about by Professor Keshab. The agency is very important, as you will find that all kind of regulatory environment is favoring the monopoly capital. The agency is protesting and slowly becoming weaken and weaken over a period of time, and therefore collective action is suffering. We have witnessed here in the northern India a huge 1 year movement of the farmers, which has been spread not locally, not nationally, but it has moved to international level. And you'll find that when the United Nations were sitting, the farmers representative was representing there, and the United Nations is in action at that time. And any visitor from India goes abroad, the farmers organization who was connected globally, they were protesting. Okay, so that kind of impact which has blocked for a moment three laws which were pure and simple, handing over the agriculture to the private monopoly. So therefore, you'll find that such a kind of agency which has acted for a particular point of time, that agency has generated huge amount of movement in not in the local level, but also not in the state level or regional level, but national and international level. So I think that is the kind of collective action which has been very much prevalent in Scandinavian countries, even in the countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and all these kind of East Asian countries where this kind of agency is working. However, the efforts of the state is continuing to weaken that, and we are turning over a period of time quite weak. Although the success stories are not being talked about, but the failure stories are being talked about in the public discourses. Therefore, the individual people are being influenced, as well as the public institutions are being weakened, public goods are declining, and public goods are becoming private goods. So that is a fundamental problem which need to more talked about, discussed about. I think we require a lot of effort to nitty-gritty of these things need to be talked about, because most of the laws passed in the parliament, even at the state level, they are in a way favoring the intervention of the global capital, local capital, or monopoly capital. But the institutions which are expected to promote the collective actions, people's participation, that is being weakened over a period of time. That is a systematic way which is happening, and that's why you'll find that even in most difficult times, people are not thinking collectively. Thank you.
Professor Sujit Bhattacharya, please. I think, yeah.
Very interesting discussions from the top scholars. I would like to try to dip into your points on the common pool resources, which I feel that it connects to what you are trying to say. And I feel that there is a serious issue of the governance in the country of the common pool resources. So, where possibly your cooperative system may be also a part of that, in that sense, but it is a larger issue of water, soil and land degradation, and it's where we are finding within our system itself the conflict between the states, the lack of clarity of the policies, and what you are saying, that monopoly and capitalism. So I would like to stop there and see what I. Thank you so much.
Professor Andrew, maybe you would say something. Yeah.
Yep. One thing before I forget is that if we're talking about a regional scale, we can not only think about the rural areas. We must think about the metropolitan cities that are within the regions, and the intermediate cities that are within the state, and how they relate to the more rural areas, and understand that rural areas are no longer rural in in this only agricultural sense. They're very diversified in their activities. There's lots of services. There's lots of, these economies are not just about agriculture. That's not to diminish the importance of agriculture, but we must look at the whole systems, and we must think about these territorial, regional systems of innovation, the local systems of innovation, also within these cities. But if we're thinking about the combining, then we're looking at markets. We're looking at rural urban interactions. How do we plan so that the urban dynamics do not invade and take over agricultural areas for housing, for luxury housing, etc. Right? And how do we make the cities viable by the ecological services that are produced in the rural areas, in the mountain catchment systems, the water catchment systems that actually, enable us to have in the cities reasonably clean water. When we're getting rid of the wastewater, making sure that does not contaminate, the water that's being used for agriculture, etc. We need to think about this in a holistic way. But I certainly agree totally with Lakhwinder. We cannot say that the state and the universities, if we're constantly working against and eroding their capabilities, that then use that as an excuse to continue to do so. That's something that politically needs to be taken on. And I think that's the only way to do it, is politically. So actually, this innovation discussion, when we get into innovation around public goods and publicly defined problems, it quickly becomes political. And so we need to think about the coalitions of actors that are influencing the political decision makers. And how do we become more sophisticated in our ways of influencing public decision making, especially in a time of progressive, I hope this isn't problematic, but let's say a little more totalitarian and less democratic decision making. And so the traditional forms of, making a nice proposal and taking it to the decision makers and hoping they actually pay attention, that don't work anymore. Maybe it never really worked, but it don't work anymore, at least here. It does not work anymore, at least here. We have to think about it a whole other way. So we're also having to think about, which goes, those of us who are encapsulated in science, technology, innovation, how do we reach out to this broader coalition of actors that are thinking about transformation and make what we do relevant for those transformations? I think that's a key issue.
Yeah.
So, can I say a few words to Sujit Bhattacharya?
Yeah, please.
Sujit, you are opening up Pandora's box with your question, because this is a very larger issue of local, regional, national, and global commons. And tragedy of commons is very well known, but with the difference only that, tragedy of commons are largely being believed that people are destroying the commons. But I think that it is the monopoly elements and the state is just destroying the commons. And I think that requires a serious concern, because
Actually, I
the
was looking at the state only in that context.
yes, that's
Thanks.
why I'm saying, because the context in economic theory and generally believed is being talked about the tragedy of commons. But I believe that you are talking about that the state is playing a very important role. So that's what I have been emphasizing, that the kind of issue which we have been facing, especially of public goods, that means you require to preserve the kind of resources, and the evolutionary process of the capitalist economic system is consuming more resources than preserving more resources. So I think that is the kind of tragedy which we have been facing and state is promoting over a period of time. We require to rethink of the development processes which is taking care of the natural environment itself. So that is my take on this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Or else we can request the president. Yes, Andrew, please.
Could I ask, like, to what extent are the universities actually becoming involved and paying attention to what Lakhwinder said, which are the, I wouldn't say success stories, but where you actually think that something's happening that's positive, or you see a good connection to the local processes going on. Is that something that's happening, that's maybe being overlooked, or there's some basis of how to start this? And what do you think are the sort of in a future perspective, what is the kind of strategies that the people that are involved in trying to do something different could have to influence policy making on a university basis? Are the universities connected to local NGOs that are actually doing really interesting, like the grassroots innovation networks work that are involved, the coalitions that are involved in what Lakhwinder said are the bright spots, which we cannot ignore, that we actually have to bring up in the discourse. So where are the universities? What's happening?
If I may just sort of like very one or two small points, if I may mention, I think there is both. There are sort of central institutes of sort of like specific crops, for instance. Let's say there is a central institute of tuber crops, for instance. A central institutes focusing on coconut research, for instance. There have been sort of sectoral or sort of product-wise central institutes. Some of them are doing quite well. And there are several state agricultural universities, SAUs as they are known. And there are also state agriculture, like in the state of Odisha, we have this Odisha University of Agriculture and Technology. So several of them, despite a lot of criticism that we know of, but several of them of late, they have been, in fact, sort of partnering with the civil society. And I'm not competent to say much on that, but I know that there have been several experiments where the technology generated in the laboratories of the agricultural universities and some of the committed agricultural technologists, they have contributed to at least sort of productivity increase. But I don't think much has happened in terms of agro processing as an activity in which the agricultural universities have played a major role. But I may be sort of mistaken on that. I was wondering whether Professor Satyakam Misra will have a point on that, because he has worked on agriculture. So, Satyakam Babu, if you would like to. Okay.
No, before he's
Uh, yeah.
I have one or two points to
Mhm.
supplement you. Uh, Look, for example, recently some of the state agriculture universities are hosting the Global Multinational Center of Seed Technologies. Okay, so in a way, the state universities as a hub in the local level is being used as some centers of the multinational corporations which are involved in seed production kind of technologies. But largely, as Professor Keshab Das has talked about, that the agriculture universities have been very successful in terms of producing new seed technologies and increase production, but they are not successful in terms of processing kind of activities, although the state universities are very much close to the farmers organization and farmer progressive kind of farmers. So they are continuously going to the rural areas, collecting the farmers, distributing seeds and knowledge and all that. So that kind of connections is working. Even the State Department of Agricultures are also, providing the kind of regulatory mechanism as well as connecting with the farmers. What kind of new technology is coming? What kind of extension system they require, and they try to guide them. But largely, this is being shifted slowly because of manpower shortages and all that. New recruitments is stopped, and that is the private partners are emerging on that kind of thing, and that is creating a lot of crisis, spurious seeds, so spurious kind of pesticide, insecticide, and all that kind of crisis. But largely the central and state governments are considering that global monopolies are much better in terms of connecting with the agriculture sector to process the agriculture produce and market it. So that is the kind of thing which the northern India, the farmers have opposed it. So that is the kind of thing which is happening, and they want that the state actions are more important rather than the multinational government, because the even collective efforts of the farmers is not sufficiently powerful enough to negotiate with the monopoly capital, where the even sometimes government submits to monopoly capital. What is the farmers organization? What is NGOs? Is a small kind of powers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think with that, may I request the President, Professor Rabi Patra sir, to give his remarks, and then we'll have the Secretary to give the vote of thanks. But Professor Rabi Patra sir, if you please say a few words.
So, friends, we have a very brilliant discussion on innovations. As I see, innovations face three challenges. One is inadequate research and development investment, and inadequate investment in skill and talent. The second is that we have a very risk averse character. So, for the public sector, there is inadequate investment, and when it comes to the private sector, our risk averse character also works. And the third issue is that we have a very limited view of the local perspective about innovations. How does it apply, or where should it work? So this is a sort of I see there is a mismatch in many cases. So these are the three important issues, and I feel that if these three issues can be resolved, then innovations will be doing good, and they will be taking place. They will be helpful also. So I have nothing more to add. We have already exceeded our scheduled time. I would now request our secretary to propose a formal vote of thanks to the esteemed professors, scholars who have uh, delivered the lectures. and those who have participated in the discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Andrew, Professor Rakhwinder Singh, and Professor Keshab Das. In fact, I should start thanking first Professor Keshab Das because he basically, established this connection, and particularly the topic is so important for us because in Odisha and in India, I think these are the issues very less discussed, and we need to really work on these issues. In fact, when this discussion was going on, I was thinking about the middle income trap that the developing countries would be facing for the lack of the innovation. And so we need to really think seriously on these issues that do transform Indian economy, or say the state economies that have different aspirations, how to strengthen our innovation systems. And a lot of literatures are saying that even America and China, their growth stories are ending because their innovations are also slowing down. So now developing countries should be the engine of growth for the entire world. And so how we can contribute to it. So I think we had brilliant discussions by Professor Andrew and Professor Lakhwinder Singh. I'm sure actually this video will also be uploaded on the YouTube channel, and I think it will provide insights to all. So thank you, Professor Keshab Das, the editor-in-chief, and for brilliantly moderating the session, and two brilliant speakers actually, who spent their Professor Andrew's morning and Professor Lakhwinder Singh's evening together, so makes the entire day. Yeah. So thank you all the participants who could join with us, and thank you, President, for being with us, and also the President-elect who is also with us. Thank you so much. So I think with this we can conclude.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Lakhwinder is much more formal in the Indian way of being formal.